Hello and welcome back to Podium with Hannah England, myself, Rich Newman and Katie Smith. So much to pack into this episode. 2 Diamond League meetings and plenty of news, including what's next for Grand Slam track after the 2025 season collapsed with one event left to go. A reminder, if you're new to this pod, and people are joining us all the time, we release twice weekly roundup episodes on Tuesdays and big name interviews on Thursdays. So before we get into this episode, how are you both doing? What have your highs been this week? Starting with you, Katie, and I think we're probably going to start this episode in a similar way to last week by talking about a completely different sport.
Talking about tennis again. No, you know what? I went to Queen's for the first time this week. So it's near like Barron's Court in West London and is one of the famous grass court tennis tournaments in the lead up to Wimbledon. And traditionally, or certainly in the last 50 years, there's only been a men's tournament, and this year, for the first time in 52 years, they've let the women play on grass. Yay! And it was really cool because it was my first time there, and I always love going to a new sporting venue, and it does feel very sort of British and quaint and like it's building up to this major summer of sport. But we had these amazing storylines as well. So the eventual winner was a woman called Tatiana Maria, and if you've not heard of her, she is going to be 38 later this year, so you know, in the so-called twilight of her career. But she's left the tour twice to give birth to her 2 daughters, one of whom is now 11 and is actually a really good player herself. And Maria said she wants to basically keep going until her daughter can play doubles with her. But she was a qualifier, so she had to qualify to make it to the main tournament and went through eventually then 7 matches to win this biggest title of her career. But she'd come into it having lost 9 matches in a row before that, so it's absolutely bonkers. My favourite bit though was once she'd won it, she wrote on the camera lens after Queen of Queens, and I just
it's stuck, hasn't it?
Iconic.
Nice.
It's gone everywhere, that, hasn't it? Hannah, you've been very busy around Europe. You've headed off to Norway. You've done some actual athletics.
Well, we were joking about Nozomi Tanaka the other day. I think I might rival her. I think I counted up. It's 5 meets in 12 days for me. I've only done 2, so I'm a bit intimidated about the next few days. But Oslo was lovely. Like really, really nice meet. I'd never been to Bislett Games, but loved every second of it. And then whizzed back to do the UK 10K champs that my husband was actually hosting as part of the University of Birmingham Track Festival they had going on. So he sort of said, "Oh, you've got to be back in time to help me on that." So I got back to do that as well. But busy few days, but lots of fun athletics.
Cool.
What did you think of Bislett?
It was really nice. I think they went nuts for the Norwegians, and we had this triathlon on for Sander Skotheim and Marcus Ruth, and that was really fun to see those guys getting celebrated. And the Karsten Warholm at the end winning the 3 hurdles was just incredible. Like you when you get a crowd that they're sort of like appreciative. And then they get a home star out and it just goes boom. And that was super fun. But I hope I can go back. I'm really lucky the meets I'm going to this year on the Diamond League. So that was definitely one like bucket list ticked off.
Aww. What about you, Rich, then?
I was also working on a sport that wasn't anything to do with athletics, Le Mans. And then, did some actual running. So got out in the Downs on Father's Day and did 13, 14 miles. And it was just beautiful, like gorgeous weather. And it was just, happy place. So really nice Father's Day.
So you're doing this solstice challenge with Soar Running, aren't you? Like, how is it actually? You've got like 5 days left. How many hours have you logged out of like the max you can get?
I'll make the 14 hours. So I'll make the £45 voucher, which will be good. But I won't get further than that because I'm going on holiday in a couple of days' time.
Right.
And I plan to not be absolutely smashing out loads of time out on the roads. And in fact, you know what? So we're going to Crete, and I have so put off by running in Crete that I basically had like some wild dogs try and attack me once. It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago in the same place, and it just put me right off. And it was not worth the hassle. So I don't think we'll be doing much running apart from maybe on the treadmill, maybe.
Fair enough.
Right, let's get into this then. Let's start with Grand Slam track. Los Angeles will not go ahead. Cancelled with one event to go. Michael Johnson putting on a brave face. adamant it will come back next year, and saying the reason was that the global economic landscape has shifted dramatically in the past year. So that's the reason that's been put behind it, money issues. What do we think then about how it's gone? Should we start with the positives first about the first three meets? So who wants to kick us off? Hannah?
I think just the calibre of athlete they got involved was fantastic, and I think the managing to get that many athletes to commit to 4 meets, 3 days initially, and even if it's gone down to 2 in Philly, to get that many athletes behind it is seriously impressive. And that would have taken a lot of work and a lot of organisation and persuasion and all of that. And that's brilliant. And I just hope that's not totally jeopardised by the cancellation of the final meet. I haven't. The athletes have all been very positive, the racers that are signed up, and none of them have come out publicly and said, I'm really annoyed. This has totally messed up this part of my season. I had my races planned and now they're not there. But I think by that last meet folding, I worry about that quality of athlete for the next meet. But hey, like they managed to sign all these athletes before they had any TV rights to anything, and with a conceptual idea last autumn, they signed a lot of these races. So hopefully, they can manage that again.
I would also add in that I think there was a freshness to it that was genuinely and is still genuinely exciting. The different concept, the idea that there was big money behind it, the rivalries, the fact that they were ensuring that athletes were competing over those different distances, and therefore for some of them not their natural distances, and it then created this real intrigue, I thought personally, and I think we talked about it last week over the middle distances, especially Hannah, that you just didn't know what kind of race you were going to get, and it felt great that you could have that consistent, like, oh well, I know in a couple of weeks when we go to LA or wherever now that I'm going to see so-and-so attack it differently, or it didn't quite work that time. So that was nice, because we do, typically in athletics quite often feel like the athletes aren't going head-to-head that often. We have to wait for the major champs. And then sometimes you want to see that race run in 3 different ways. So I really enjoyed that. And I think there was appetite for that too.
And I think you're right there. The athletes out of their comfort zones in the other races. I think normally if you get a 400 metre specialist running a 200, they'd be doing it at a small meet without much competition, and it wouldn't mean anything. But instead, you've got Marilady Paulino saying, right, if I want that 100k for the win, I have to nail this 200. It's not just a training exercise. And the same with Marco Arop in the 15. I already said how brilliant I thought he was. But him, again, you might do a 1500 at a small meet and it doesn't quite mean as much, and you're not really being pushed to your limit. Whereas to do it against an Olympic podium in the men's 15, it just kind of brings that extra focus to it. And yeah, I think lots of athletes, they do weird distances in the early season, but it's never high pressure and it's never with everyone watching. It's a training exercise.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of athletes have really enjoyed it when they've been there as well, the races and the challenges. They've really felt the freshness. There's a big emphasis around it not just being about the racing as well. It's like a big event on social media, all the content creators around it as well. There's a different way of presenting athletics, and we've seen it. Do you think some of it was a little bit too ambitious to start with? Did they go a little bit too big too soon? I mean, the other thing to say as well is that Michael Johnson, he's not been afraid to change things as it's been going along. So actually, I guess that might give some of the athletes some confidence going forward that he knows what he's doing, that he's making these bold, brave decisions. It just doesn't have a great look, does it, that you haven't managed to complete the season?
I think one of my concerns as well, sort of that leans into that, is that it's all well and good getting athletes to buy into something. They love it and you're giving them big money. But where was that translating to fans? There was clearly still some sort of disconnect in this whole, like, we are mixing up the sport, because I actually don't know what the broadcasting figures were particularly. I don't know if either of you two have sort of numbers on that, but it's never a good look, isn't it, when stadiums are pretty empty? So yeah. Where was the issue there of like translating it into ticket sales? And also, for us lot who are more based in Europe, I do totally understand why it was over in the States initially, but if we're going to branch it out, is there a European meet that you could do? Is there one based in the UK? Because chances are, I really think you could sell a ton of tickets in those sorts of venues.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's super tricky, right? So you've got athletes, you've got fans, you've got TV. You've got three stakeholders there you've got to please. And it's hard to get something that works for all three. And what will bring fans through the door won't necessarily land on television, and vice versa. If you're trying to make a brilliant product for television, it could alienate the people in the stadium. And it's a really hard thing to get right. And I just wonder if there was a bit of a disjoint, because I think there was a lot. You said it, Katie. There was a lot of social media interest. I'd say they nailed that. Hooking people in on. I'm sure their social media interactions went through the roof, because they were fantastic.
Clippable moments, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and the athletes have really enjoyed. They felt very well looked up. You can tell they felt very well looked after, like very respected, very given a platform to perform on. But then you would say, I mean, the TV production was sort of 50-50. It changed. They did evolve it through the three meets, but some people didn't like it, some people loved it, which is probably the way with anything. But the ticket sales, it's a really hard thing to do, and we see that meets all over the world struggle with ticket sales, and we do have these big meets in Europe that always do fine, but there are a lot of meets that don't get big fans out, but it was just left them a little bit exposed for criticism, I think.
And then building into that, you've got the fact that because the program is not as condensed as you would have in, say, a Diamond League, 2 hours with track and field, if you're a fan in the stadium, and obviously I can't talk to this because I wasn't there literally in the stadium, but are you sitting around for fair chunks of time not actually seeing as much as you would in a Diamond League?
Yeah, but for an American audience, actually, they're more used to that than we are talking as Europeans, because there are far more stoppages in play in the NFL, in the NHL, in the baseball. So maybe that's not as big an issue. But for TV, there's obviously all the punditry bits, there's all the content that's going in between us. They were trying to tell stories. They're trying to do what we're talking about with the podcast, right? They had pre-recorded VTs where they had gone to go and spend some time with the athletes. They were telling, we weren't getting that in the UK because we were taking more breaks. But I think maybe we didn't get the full product here. Plus it was on really late. So actually we're watching not the full rerun. We're watching just clips of races, basically. I just wonder whether... So it started as a 3-day event, right? And then it was condensed to 2. And I just sort of wonder whether it even needs to be 2. Could it not be a 1-day event? It doesn't need to be just over 2 hours. It could be 3 hours or something like that. My idea would be that you kind of take it, that's an easier way of sustaining the competition. You can take it around the world 1 day and maybe you just do one event, but it all builds towards one big league table. And then you don't need to really worry about the point systems as much, because I'm not sure that works. I didn't like the fact that athletes knew what they had to do to win the big prize, and then they didn't have to really race, which is the whole point of this event. So I think there are tweaks. Could you run? Could someone like Hannah, for example, that's just your event is the easiest one to give this example for. Could you run 1,500 meters in Philadelphia, then go and do an 800 in Madrid, and then the next one is 1,000 meters in London? Could you play around with the distances a bit, and then that all builds in towards one league table for one big champion at the end? I realize it doesn't mean that each slam has a champion, but could it not be just one Grand Slam champion at the end of each discipline at the end of the season? I just think that would work better, because you could just play around with the distances. You can be a bit quirky. Jake Whiteman, who we've got coming up in a few weeks, has talked about how he thinks maybe that should have been the way that Grand Slam track went. You can play around with these distances a bit more. We can have a bit more. We're going to talk about 300-meter hurdles later, for example, aren't we? Could we have more of those, play around a bit?
I think the one issue you've got with that idea is athletes have only got a finite number of times they want to race before, say, the trials. Especially you look at the US athletes, that's a massive deal. You probably only want to race 5 or 6 times before you go into that big dance to try and get yourself to world champs. And do you want to waste one of those shots on a 1K? I agree from a spectator point of view and from honing your tactics, it's really entertaining. But I think you would get a few athletes saying, why am I going to waste a whole swing? I'm going to taper down, I'm going to get ready for it, and I'm not going to you'd have to get those meets included in the world ranking system somehow.
But
you have to count towards your world ranking.
It's not the flip side to that, though, Hannah. It's saying I don't want to burn out by doing 2 races in one weekend.
Yeah, you're right. If they're willing to do 2 races in one weekend, and when I like the idea of following a whole league through the whole season. We do it. you crown a Diamond League champion. But the Golden League, this is showing my age, but the Golden League, they used to have a thing where if you went undefeated the whole season, there was $1 million for the prize the prize pot. So you had to share it. If more than one person went undefeated the whole season, you shared it. But so I think one year there was like Pamela Gelimo and Kenenisa Bakili going into the final. They were the only 2 people undefeated for the whole season. And I want to say it was only Bakili that managed it. So then he took the whole $1 million. And like that, I don't know if they have budget. I don't know if anyone has budget for that anymore. But because you're right, the points got a little bit confusing. But yeah, if you keep it about winning, if you don't want to make it about times and you keep it about winning, like something like that, like an incentive at the end could be cool.
Yeah, I think obviously it does get a little bit too close to Diamond League, but I think you can still keep that emphasis on the racing by tweaking it a bit. Clearly, there has to be a change. And just before we move on from this, with hearing about the fact that it was cancelled because of money, we all in agreement it needs to be branched out beyond North America and the Caribbean, right? So we need to see something in Europe, maybe in Africa, maybe in Australia or something like that. It needs to be a world league, right? Where's the money come from then? Do you get the idea that this could be, and there are rumors about this, right? Do you think there could be this could be the next big target for Saudi investment, for example? That is a rumor, and you could see it happening, couldn't you? Maybe does it need something big, a massive cash injection to make this a success?
Yeah, I think so, and I get the impression along the way that Michael Johnson was sort of expecting that to possibly happen this time around, and it hasn't. And I do feel for him a little bit because, like we say, he's not been scared to tinker with the format and change things, and he has put his neck on the line in so many ways. You know, he's really had to defend everything, and I think he felt as though offers and sponsors and backers would come in. It's whether they feel as though they want to keep, I don't know, perhaps the ownership and the purity of the product of what they're doing, because as soon as you potentially look at something like Saudi money, that would mean a meet in Saudi, and then there's also options over what kind of distances would they want to see. I was quite interested when I've done stuff in the Middle East before covering events, because there's so many East African immigrants living over there. Their huge passion is the longer distances, but actually I think the three of us are probably all slightly in agreement that we're not quite sure if the longer distances have fitted into Grand Slam track. So do you condense it down into like a smaller, shorter distances, but then does that work in those places? So I think there's loads to consider. I think the money is needed, but it's, you know, as with every sport has been finding out recently, it's how much ownership do you want to hand over if you do that.
Yeah, a big ambitious project. I think we are all in agreement that it could work. Maybe it hasn't gone to plan this season, but I think we are going to see a different version of Grand Slam track next year, aren't we? It's not going to disappear yet.
No, and so one more thing on the long distances. I don't know if I said it before, but have the halfway prize money. This is what we had. If you talk to any endurance athlete of my era, they'll talk about Fifth Avenue Mile because it's the best thing ever. I'll talk about it every week if I have to. They used to put $1,000 on halfway. Which I think the win was $5,000, and you could get an extra $1,000 if you were leading at halfway, as long as you finished underneath a decent time. So you couldn't just burn yourself out in the first 800 and then jog it in. You had to go sub 4 for the men, sub 4:30 for the women, and it was just that. And I think Grand Slam could just do something like that. You don't need take out the last person when they're last across the line. You just give a big cash injection to the person that's leading us on at halfway, as long as they do something respectable by the end.
Yeah.
Have I already said that? Have I already said that to you guys?
I think so, but you said you're going to say it every week,
yeah.
So.
I think
that's the solution for the lot. But yeah, just cut it out if we've already done it. I can't remember. I feel like I've said that like so much in Oslo. I was like, we just need to do this.
Right, let's move on to some of the big results over the past week, and we'll start with the most recent Diamond League in Stockholm. And we have to begin with Mondo Duplantis' 12th world record, the first time that he's broken a world record in Sweden in front of his home fans. Not really a surprise anymore to us that he's doing this, and he's incrementally beating this world record. But I mean, you know, that one looked like it meant a lot, didn't it?
It definitely did, and he does rise to the occasion, Mondo. I think he said in the press conference before Oslo, he said, you know, he really saw that Olympic winning the Olympics in a world record as just sort of that you can't do better. He was so proud of having done a world record on that occasion. So he's got this level where he can beat everyone, you know, this being competitive and turning it on to win something. But then he has got this extra level that seems to unlock in those special occasions. And, you know, competing at home was definitely one for him, I think.
Well, and he said beforehand, I thought this was fascinating. He's like, it's the one thing that has been keeping me going right now is breaking the world record in Stockholm. And I was like, wow, because I remember when we spoke to him ahead of World Indoors in Nanjing, and it was all the usual questions, you know, you've won everything, you're the world record holder, like what do you do now to motivate yourself? And I felt like that day he didn't really have a sort of specific answer. It was the usual, like, well, I'm not done yet, I like winning, you know, I clearly like breaking world records and like earning money, so it's all good. So for him to be quite open and specific, I really like that, because it's not necessarily the target that all athletes would have. And sometimes we forget, I think, that because he's a global superstar, how much Sweden still means to him and that Stockholm Diamond League. So I love that. And I'm just so glad he managed to do it, because I think in Oslo, obviously you were there, Hannah, when he sort of wobbled a few times and then he got the 6:15 and we were like, oh God, okay, he's not ill. Like, it's fine. Yeah. Here we go. And I was worried, you know, it is pressure in Stockholm. He's done it so many times, but he looked so cool and composed, and then he's whipping his shirt off. I don't know if you guys saw when he goes over, I wasn't quite sure, family members, maybe grandparents or something. He went and hugged them, but he had his shirt off and they were just like, oh, come on, Andre, shirt back on.
I felt like it was a little bit like, come on, Armand, put your shirt on.
And he quite sheepishly was like, oh yeah, better pop that. Put that back on.
But there's an element, I wanted to talk about the shirt taking off. Well, first we need the quote for Rich from his daughter. What did your 5-year-old say?
Yeah, my daughter, we've mentioned her before, she's only 5, but she got really into watching it. And yeah, as he cleared it and he was running off and the shirt whipped around his head, she just went, well, why is he doing this? Is it smelly? And it's that rule. I've always found it's one of those weird things that, I mean, I've never done anything incredible like this before, and I've never scored a goal in a World Cup final or something like that. But this desire for a man just to whip their shirt off it's something that's never really resonated with me. I don't get it.
Is it to do with your abs, or is it to do with the sporty occasion?
It's just so exciting. I need to take my top off. It's a funny emotion, isn't it?
Yeah, no, but I feel like your daughter's really missed out on that sort of cultural phenomenon that was the shirt pulling off in football years ago, and ever since they started carding them, and it doesn't happen as often. I think it's a really important part of her education, so I'm glad Mondo has come out here.
But I was going to say, if you remember, Varholm took his shirt off in Oslo as well and then put it back on really quickly. There is a quirk that if you don't have your shirt and your number on, you don't get your prize money. I'd like to see them try and pull that on Varholm, Varholm in Oslo or Mondo in Stockholm. They wouldn't do it because they wouldn't want to, you know. But there is a thing that you are meant to keep because of the advertisers on the number and the decorum of having your shirt on. You can get penalised. I mean, I don't think it will happen, but that was with Varholm. I could see him be like, oh wait, I'm going to put that on. I'm going to put that back on. I'm going to get in trouble. I was going to say on.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, if I was going to say on Mondo, what I liked that he said in Oslo as well was, you know, the same question, how do you keep going? You've won everything. And he said, when I have a success, I party, I celebrate it. And that's how I keep the mental energy going. I have to take a step back, I celebrate, I get it out my system, and I come back. Because we see so many athletes so focused on the champs at the end of the season that they don't let themselves feel those emotions through the year. And if you're going to do that year on year on year, that becomes really, really hard. I think if you're chasing a gold medal that you've never had, then you probably can lock in and do that for months. But for Mondo, it was just this idea. He was like, no, I have to celebrate. I have to celebrate through the year. Else, what's the point? So I don't know if you all saw the clips on Eurosport of his interview after Paris. when he couldn't string a word together. Like he was in an absolute state the next morning. And the pole vaulters do that. They do seem to kind of blow off steam in between the competitions.
I mean, going back to my favourite sport, which is, of course, tennis, athletics.
Oh, you're going to talk about Alcaraz's shots, aren't you?
Yeah. So Alcaraz just wins the most epic Roland Garros final ever. It was, 5.5 hours in the end. It was sensational. And then he's like, yeah, in my own words, I'm going to go and get wasted in Ibiza now. And it's definitely something his coaches have talked about, like, does he take it seriously enough? And I sort of rate that. I think if you know that you need time off, like so many athletes talk about going back and wanting to enjoy it more in the moment. I mean, you can talk about that more than I can, Hannah, but I think it's so normalizing and refreshing.
I saw Keely Hodgkinson after Paris. She was just like, nah, going to Marbella with my family. Like, I think it was Marbella or Malaga. She's like, nah, that's like that. I think she knew she would have to do, if she did well, she'd have to do media the next morning. So she allowed enough time for that, and then that was it. She was gone. She was gone on holiday. And like, funny to say, whilst we're on Keely Hodgkinson, we haven't seen her since. She hasn't been able to race since the Olympic Games in Paris, and that's we had a wonderful few Diamond League meetings, and she was meant to be there in Stockholm running the 800, and she wasn't. And it's I don't know. It's been a shame not to see her, and I hope that she can come back. She does often come back on that first race so great, but it was her training partner Georgia Hunter-Bell that ended up picking up the spoils in Stockholm.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a moment. I just want, before we move on from Mondo, Steve Cram in commentary says he's perhaps the biggest star in track and field right now. Is there anyone that rivals him at the moment? And a boring answer is Noah Lyles, so you're not allowed to say it.
The obvious question, the obvious answer, not the... Well, all right. It depends how you define popularity, because the easiest metric is like social media following. Like if people are bothering to follow them, does
I think I would say it's more, which is he one of the only athletes right now, apart from Noah Lyles, that transcends the sport, where people who are really casual fans are talking about it?
Well, the anecdote on that, so my watermark would be like, if you go to a wedding, I went to a wedding the other day and people were talking about Jakob Ingebrigtsen. Okay. And I was like, okay, like normal people were talking about Jakob Ingebrigtsen, not your athletics people that work in it or did it. So that for me, yeah. So like Neeraj Chopra has got followers through the roof, and he's massive in India.
It depends where you are, doesn't it? A lot of this, we are talking from a UK perspective and a European perspective. So I'm sure Sydney McLaughlin-Lerone is massive in the States, for example.
I'd maybe throw in Sha'Carri Richardson as well, just in the, I think, again, it's a story that people have really bought into, and Sprint, the Netflix series, probably helping as well, some of those characters who've had a bit more exposure. And I just think sprints wise, I feel like she pulls in people's attention in a way that maybe even someone like Julian Alfred still hasn't quite got yet, although she is going fast, isn't she? I know we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Well, look, if there's loads of big stars, then we're going to be really happy about that. So it means that the athletics in a fantastic spot, because there was a big panic when Usain Bolt retired, wasn't there? But I think he
was there in Oslo, though, wasn't he?
He was.
Oslo and Stockholm.
Yeah.
He's on a little Euro tour. I think he says it's the first time he's been back to kind of international athletics since he retired, and
I don't know if you saw Julian Alfred and how excited she was to meet him. Did you see that was brilliant. She was like, she basically could not speak until someone had like taken him out of her eye line. I quite like that.
Whilst you're talking about Julian Alfred, then, just too good in Stockholm. I mean, can anyone get close to her at the moment? She seems in fantastic form. A decent run as well for Dina Asher-Smith.
But I wonder, with LA being cancelled for Grand Slam track, if we'll get Melissa Jefferson-Wooden over for a Diamond League before, or maybe she'll do pre. She is a Nike athlete, isn't she, Melissa Jefferson-Wooden? And sometimes that's part of your contract, doing pre. And yeah, maybe we'll get that matchup between her and Julian Alfred. Now she's lost the opportunity to compete in that final Grand Slam track, because I think until we have that, we can't say Alfred's too good.
Yeah, I totally agree. But also, I think what's so dangerous is the Oslo 100, I think was her first of the season, wasn't it? And she runs a 10.89 and basically was like, that was awful. My coach is going to ruin me because every single step was wrong. And then she comes out and does a 10.57. You're like, Oh, okay. Well, I didn't believe you, but now I do. Imagine if you run well. And so I just think it's so exciting. But like you say, I think it's the head-to-head element that's actually more tantalising with that right now.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens with Melissa Jefferson-Wood and whether we see her in Europe or all those head-to-heads in the next few months. But it's starting to hot up a bit, isn't it? The women's 100. Okay, and then let's return as well to the 800 meters you mentioned already, Hannah, Georgia Hunter-Bell. And there's been a lot of discussion about whether this is going to be the focus for Georgia over the coming months and years. No Keeley there, as you were mentioning. We still haven't seen her this season. She's got 3 months left until the World Championships. So we all hope that she can get back into shape and to be really competitive by that point. And just while we're on Keeley, I mean, it sounded like it's a late decision, a late withdrawal. It's only end of last week. So we've seen her training as well, so it looks like she's been in working her way up in decent shape. So let's hope this is not too serious. But what did you make of Georgia's performance and the way that she came through at the end there, Hannah?
We rewound it and watched it again. Like Luke was like, my husband was like, she was last at 200, and I think we've probably not spoken about Georgia Hunter-Bell that much on Podium, but for those that don't know, she was a big talent as a junior, and then went to college in America, just kind of fell out of love with the sport. Things didn't go her way with injuries, and then took this long break from the sport. And to see her come back with I think less pressure or a different pressure. She knows what an office job is like. She knows she's trying to avoid it. She doesn't want to go and do that. And it's this like freedom and joy to be on the track. Whereas I think if you've grown up competing, this pressure just mounts year on year on year, and you kind of just get so convoluted with it. Whereas George, it's just a breath of fresh air. I think many other athletes would have panicked if they were chewed up out the back with 200 to go, and she was like, nope, just empty the tank, sprint all the way through, and it was absolutely perfect.
Although I
do you think she can be a major challenger, Hannah, come the World Championships in the 800? Do you see her as a better 800 runner than a 15?
I think I'd have to absolutely crunch the stats, but she could be the best. I think she's the best combined 8:15 runner in the world right now. I think, if you take her two personal bests, like she is, and we used to have a lot of 8:15 specialists, and then the likes of Safan Hassan and Jakob Ingebrigtsen pushed it more towards 15.5, and that was the end of my career, and I didn't enjoy it. I prefer the 8:15 sort of specialism, and I see Georgia as coming right back in there. Nikki Hilt's very good at both of them as well, and there's a few athletes that are. But when you put the rounds in at the Worlds as well, that plays into Georgia's hands. And I think the 15's first. So I think I would love to see Georgia Hunter-Bell do both. Like, why not? She's definitely good enough. And I think she could handle all the rounds.
Yeah. What do you think, Katie? Have you enjoyed watching the way that she's progressing this season?
Yes, certainly. And I, like Hannah says, I like her demeanour and her attitude. I remember I think we were chatting to her after Nanjing in the airport, weren't we, on the way home? Yeah. And she's just quite a normal person. She was just chatting away about the food in the hotel, and we'd all said we were so confused about what we were eating at times because all the labelling was really hilarious in China, which still great throwback. I think they were called vegetable mushroom bags or something. I was like, what is this? But she just comes across as quite down to earth, and it felt like even off the back of having raced pretty much 12 hours before, she's already talking about other things. You get that sense that she's got a life away from athletics, and I always think that's quite a healthy sign. Also, in that style of racing that she did yesterday in the Stockholm at the weekend, I do wonder if Mary Moraa has sort of slightly redefined the way that the 800 works in terms of that kind of dropping the pace and then going to the back and then going to the front. I'm going to use a football analogy. I don't know if this will be lost on you, Hannah, at all, but I don't know if you've heard of Darwin Núñez, who plays for Liverpool, and he's just got this reputation of being just slightly chaotic, because if he has too much time to think about something, he will just completely blast the ball over the bar, and you're like, you're really good at this. I don't understand why you're not getting it. And then the times where he doesn't have to think, he instinctively scores an absolute worldie. But he's just this agent of chaos where the fans can't quite decide if they absolutely love him or just think he needs to train better and be better at his job. And I sort of like that with Mary Moraa, that you're never quite sure which one she's going to get. And I think it was Crammy in commentary was saying these athletes like Keely has started doing now is you need to learn to like actually just ignore her in a race, because if you get sucked into it, then that can be really destabilizing. And I think Georgia Hunter Bell, to end this very chaotically made point, is quite good at doing that.
You say about having life away from the sport. I mean, she literally has had one. So she has a completely different perspective to so many of her rivals. And I just think that she just seems to be really enjoying the sport. This is like almost like a second chance at this career. And she's absolutely making the most of it.
Did you see her collab on Instagram with Tinder? She was like, met my husband on Tinder. They did a little. They must have got her some sponsorship just to be, that's it. Very normal person who's been out there in the normal world, not like these square athletes that just sit at Diamond Leagues for all of their 20s.
Let's just go through just a few other highlights then from the Diamond League in Stockholm before we sort of do a little bit of Stockholm and Oslo together with the hurdles. But we mentioned this last week. We're not going to pull out every single event and analyse every single one, but just some honourable mentions, I think. Innes Fitzgerald, from a British point of view, lots of hype around her for the last year or so, lots of media attention as well because of her ethical stance and the way that she's been applauded for, pushing out the issues of climate change and talking about that and turning down opportunities to fly around the world. But look, terrific third in the 3,000 meters. So there's that. Andreas Almgren, 5,000 meter European record, 11th best time ever, something he's been targeting. An amazing day for the Swedes. And Nicola Oleslagers as well, winning the high jump in 2 meters and 1 centimeter. I mean, watch this space regarding this podcast and Nicola. But she's been in good shape already this season as well. What stands out for you if you want to pull out maybe one of those?
Andreas Almgren was super impressive. It was like opposite from Oslo. So Oslo had 13 people under 13 minutes, and it was this big pack. And I loved the fact that you actually had to get your tactics right to succeed in Oslo. Whereas Almgren, it was a pure time trial. He was out there on his own. But the way he looked, that final 800, he was just locked in, because he came through 800 and I said, there's no way he's going to do this. And then, of course, you remember he started as a 200-metre runner, then a 400, then an 800. And he was fine, just absolutely blasting this last 800. But I thought he wasn't going to do it. But everything in his belief was the opposite. And just to express that and get it out and break the European record was sensational. And what a week for 5K. I mean, George Mills had just gone second on the all-time European list. And now he's bumped down to third.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I would love to ask all those men across those two events, which race would you rather have been in? Because there would have been athletes that would have thrived on the competitiveness of Oslo, and then maybe others that would have gone, wow, if I could have had that clean run that Algrim had, I would have run a European record as well. I don't know.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. I guess this goes back to our whole rivalries thing, shoulda, woulda, coulda. If you were in the race, then we'd know. I loved Nicola Oleslagers and Mahuchik going at it in the high jump again. So I think it was in Nanjing, wasn't it, where Oleslagers beat her to indoor gold, and this was the first time they'd really kind of gone at it, I think, on the Diamond League circuit so far. And it just is really exciting, because I don't actually think I have a favourite between them right now in terms of who is going to turn up and get the win. And I think it's so good to be pushing each other. It was 2:01, I think, was her final winning jump, wasn't it? So really good to see it around that mark as well. I just think that's brilliant for a season ahead, and it's only going to push Mahuchik onto bigger and better things.
It's a great rivalry, isn't it, as well? Because you look at it and it's they are such different characters. So Nicola Oleslagers is this absolute hive of energy. She's celebrating every single clearance. It's like she's won it already, and that gives her the energy to go on back to the book. And then she's just bubbly, really bubbly. And you've got the complete opposite. Mahuchik clears, back to the sleeping bag, lie down. Just conserve. And that's what I love about this sport, the difference of characters and how we see them. It's just, they could not be, I don't think they could be more different, those two.
I want Anya's take on the sleeping bag.
Yeah.
Show Anya a video of that, see what she says. But before we leave the rest of this, before we head to the hurdles in Stockholm, just an honourable mention to Sandy Morris winning again. I mentioned last week, like her having a Diamond League victory for the first time in years, and then she backs it up again. So I'm on Sandy Morris watch. I'll do a bit more digging, try and figure out what's going on in the next few weeks.
Well, before we move on to the hurdles, Hannah, I think also it's probably a good opportunity actually to talk about the George Mills British records in Oslo, because we're coming off the back of what we were just talking about with Andreas Holmgren and the new European record as well. And I mean, it's a massive British record that he's taken away from Sir Mo Farah. There's been a lot of talk about him, a lot of attention because of the fact that his dad is the former England footballer Danny Mills. And so I look at just how far he's come. And I just want to sort of talk about that really, because I had a lot of contact with George when he was coming through around COVID, and he was at the University of Brighton and he was studying. And at that point, he was more of an 8:15 guy. And he hadn't really done like 5Ks. And when I said to him, what's your longest run, for example? Would you ever give 5K a go? He's been like, nah, it's too far. Like, I don't really fancy it. Now he is the greatest British 5,000 meter runner that we've ever had. And I just think it's an incredible journey that he's been on. He's changed coaches. He used to train in Brighton under John Bigg. He's moved to On. He lives in Europe now, and he's training completely differently. He seems so locked in. His attitude as well seems to be hyper-focused. And I thought he was quite chilled before. He's still pretty chilled, but he is laser-focused. And you've heard Danny and George and the family talk generally about how, they're kind of not satisfied. As soon as they've achieved something, they're automatically looking at how can we improve? How could that have been better? And I just think he's going to be an exciting athlete to watch over this next year or two, because I think he's also learning racecraft generally. We saw it a little bit exposed in Paris at the Olympics, and he's learning that. And I think he almost executed that pretty much perfectly, didn't he, in Oslo? And you were there to see it, Hannah.
I think when anyone moves up the distances, whether it's from 8 to 15 or all the way to 5K, I think you've got a tactical advantage. You're used to having to think at double speed, and suddenly you've got a chance to slow the race down. So I think he has an advantage there, but you've got to have the fitness and the ceiling to use that. And that's what he's bought. That's what he's got in the last few years. He's not even run that many 5Ks like ever. And compared to some of the other people, so to be the British record holder in an event that's still pretty new for you. And what I saw when he went through with the final K, I think it was Ndika Mwanayu pushed for a tiny bit but couldn't do enough. And I just saw George Mills say, like, I know I can run a big time today, and just go for it. And so I think that would have compromised his overall position in the race. I think if he just waited, I think he would have won. But that wasn't, that was only part of, he said, didn't he? He wanted three things: European record, a win, and the British record. He only got one of them. And I think Nico Young should say, thanks very much. You helped me do an American record. So I think George's tactics are better. But I would love to ask him, what went wrong in Miami in the Grand Slam track event there? Because it didn't look right there. And he's come back out like a different athlete a few weeks later. So there's got to be some changes they made.
We're looking at this from a very British perspective, but from the American point of view, Nico Young, what do you make of him? And should the Americans be excited about him coming through? And whilst we're on that as well, the flip side, we're seeing Cole Hocker, who is continuing at 5,000 metres, but not quite executing the way that he'd like to be.
I mean, absolutely, they should be getting excited about Nico Young. I think they all are excited about Nico Young, and now they're just like, "Ha! So we told you you should be excited about Nico Young." I think he ran 12:51 indoors, and his coach said that a lot of that was done solo. So we should expect more than 12:51. He was already the second fastest American ever, and then the kick he had at Penn, like he absolutely put everyone else away at the Grand Slam event there, the 3K. So I wasn't surprised, but I think Nico Young and George Mills and some of the other athletes benefited from it not quite being world record pace. I think had it gone 12:35 pace, they would have had as much support, as many bodies around them to keep that pace moving. They would have been running a little bit more solo. So I think, Nico Young, big talent. And Cole Hocker, I think he's a strength 1,500 metre runner. We've seen that. He struggled on the 8s and Grand Slam. So I think it's a pretty good showing for him to come over and presumably at last minute notice, if he was expecting to run in LA I don't know. Yeah, don't know about it. But yeah, for him to come over and still go was he around about 13 minutes? I still think that's impressive from him.
Hurdles then. Let's have a look at this. So from Oslo to Stockholm and Karsten Warholm. Katie, yeah, another exciting run from Warholm in that 300.
Oh, I just love it when he's in really good form. It makes me so sad when he's injured. When was it? It was Oregon. Do you remember that year where he had the injuries leading into it, and obviously it'd come off the big world record in Tokyo? And I had to interview him after he decided to step out in the final, and it was just obviously not going to happen. And Dos Santos won it that day, and it was quite heartbreaking. But the point I'm trying to make is he's a very brave runner, obviously, and like the way he does it, the way he attacks it, and I thought it was quite brave. He's the kind of guy that isn't scared, I think, to fail as well. You know, some athletes will just take themselves away if they're not at top form, if they think that a race is, you know, if they've got these top guys around them and they're not, you know, 100% that day. And that's what I really rate about him. And he will always front up and he'll talk to the media about it as well. And so obviously going into the 300 hurdles, I was so intrigued because it's 300 and he had the home crowd. And I just feel like he's sort of getting into stride. I sometimes think he's quite quiet for a few months, and that's always really dangerous with Karsten, because you just are like, what is brewing under the ice in Norway? You know, what's the magic? And it was such an intriguing race. Hannah, you were there. I feel like that's our catchphrase today, so you should talk us through it. But from my perspective, like, Benjamin goes out so hard. I think he's going to hold on. And then some magic from Karsten into that final hurdle where suddenly he seems to just fast forward like 10 meters and he just has it, I thought was incredible, that strength, which then he didn't quite have that switch at the end of the 4 hurdles in Stockholm. And I don't know whether there's an element of fatigue there to count in as well. But yeah, the 3 hurdles was cool. It's awesome.
And I think watching Stockholm last night, Warholm was managing to hold off Benjamin until the final 3 hurdles, maybe. And he overstrided. I don't know. Horrible.
Overstrode?
He overstrode coming into the home straight. And I just thought, oh no, like something's wrong here. Like the energy it takes to lengthen your stride. You don't want to be doing that. Often the athletes add in an extra stride at that point to keep the cadence high. And I don't know if maybe he chose to not add in a stride to keep on his favourite leg. Sometimes they do that, but whatever, it didn't work. And Warholm his last 100 just wasn't there. And you could say it's fatigue and the emotions from Oslo, but I hope more it's a technical cue that they will add in an extra stride earlier, conserve some energy. But Rai Benjamin and Alison Dos Santos were really vocal in Oslo in saying, yeah, lads, but it's the 3 hurdles. Like, it's all very well and good, but it's the 3 hurdles. Rai Benjamin, it was his first hurdle since the Olympics. So he was like, that's that. Like, this is fine. He hit the last hurdle in Oslo. So he was like, yep, see you on Sunday. Alison Dos Santos was like, 300 hurdles doesn't suit me. Like, I need it to be longer. This is too quick. See you Sunday. And then we get to Sunday, and the tables are totally turned. Rai Benjamin looked absolutely supreme. Alison Dos Santos, I thought he was looking tired in Oslo, maybe from the Grand Slam track events, but he was fine in Stockholm. His last 50 was brilliant. And then it was Warholm that looked vulnerable in the end.
Yeah, but Warholm's put such a massive effort in, hasn't he, into that? I mean, the 300 was a really big target for him. So, yeah, they could sort of look at it and go, yeah, see you Sunday and all that kind of stuff. But Warholm would be like, yeah, but I gave it everything in Oslo and I came for this and that's what I got.
Mm-hmm. But then they'd say you shouldn't have because it's only 3 hurdles. It's not.
So what are we saying and what are we thinking ahead of Tokyo, with the caveat, of course, it's months away still, but that, as Dos Santos and Rai Benjamin will be saying, that's over 4 hurdles, so we'll see you there, mate. Like, what are our early predictions on that? And firstly, just to say how exciting. This is so cool that the 3 of them have already given us that little flavour already.
I wonder, Rai Benjamin is pretty injury prone. So I don't think we'll see him an awful lot. He did say in one of the press conferences, if I race, it has to be for a reason. It has to be for a purpose. So I could see the purpose of tagging these 2 together, starting your season with the 3 hurdles, then doing the 4 hurdles. I don't know if we'll see that much more from Rai Benjamin, whether he'll just go focus on the US trials, then maybe a bit between the trials and the world champs. Dos Santos, I expect him to race a whole lot, and then I'd be concerned about him holding the form all the way to Tokyo. And Varholm, I think he'll be fine. He's been very, very good at peaking for the major championships, again, if he stays healthy. But at the moment, I think Rai Benjamin looks best.
Yeah, but I think Varholm, I think you've got to take into account how much the hurt of Paris will linger over him, and he is motivated for home. So I just think no stone left unturned. If Rai Benjamin, though, can keep himself fully healthy, I just think that's going to be an absolute battle. And the reason why I'm not saying Dos Santos, I think you're right, Hannah. I just wonder whether he'll run himself into the ground a little bit too much ahead of Tokyo.
The other thing just to throw into the mix there as well is that Tokyo, of course, the track where Varholm set his untouchable world record, or it has been so far. How much that plays in, considering he didn't have the fans last time, and I think he's the kind of guy that will absolutely relish having a packed stadium that night.
Yeah. Well, and if 4 hurdles is your thing, I'd like to recommend Citius Mag did an interview with Rai Benjamin's coach, Joanna Harris. I think it was brilliant, and the way they talked about the disappointment he felt in Tokyo and not winning, and then not being able to win in front of a home crowd in Eugene, and then not winning. It's just all these nots. And for him to get the job done in Paris, and I love they had this phrase they use. It was called aggressively patient. Like, you have to keep that belief that it's going to happen, but you can't. You have to make it happen. And so for Rai Benjamin to be in great shape and not be chasing and not be forcing anything, I think is a kind of position he's earned, I think, over the last Olympic cycle. So I'm quite happy to see him in good shape.
Okay, before we finish the British 10K champs at the weekend as well, Hannah, you were there. Victories for Emil Keres and Megan Keith, and both of them have had some injury setbacks recently and over the past year or so, especially for Megan Keith. But great to see them back and performing well.
Epic performances from both of them. Emil Keres already selected for Tokyo in the marathon, but he couldn't do London with an injury. So for him to come back and run a lifetime best, 27:27, is really impressive. He had some pacemakers and he had the wave lights, but he was largely on his own. And Megan Keith, we all saw her in a really bad state in Paris. She said, I can't call myself an Olympian unless I finish this. And she did. But to see her back winning a British title, defending her British title from last year, was great. And she still has the standard for Tokyo from last year. So she can get selected now for the British team in winning that trial. And Callie Hauger Thackeray, who is second, she has the standard as well in her second 10K of the week. So she could go as well. And she said she kind of wants to do track this summer. She doesn't think the marathon will suit her in Tokyo, the heat and the tactics and all of that. She sounded more like she wants to have a go at track and then look at an autumn marathon. So that was quite an interesting sort of revelation from those champs.
Because she's already been announced, though, hasn't she, in the team? Yeah. She has been selected for the marathon. So you think she's your... She said it.
We asked her on the street.
She's going to lean away from it. Okay, interesting. Yeah. As for Emil, though, we think he will attack the Tokyo Marathon?
Yeah, I think he's all in on the marathon. 4th place at the Olympics. He's got that super fast time, the 2:06 from London last year. I think he's happy to kind of be a championship marathoner.
And finally, the NCAA Championships. Hannah, you're someone who's been keeping an eye on this a little bit more, given your background and everything, being a champion yourself.
Twice.
Okay, twice. What stood out for you? Is there one headline that we should all be looking into a little bit more?
You should all look at Roisin Willis, the Stanford University athlete. She won World Juniors before going to Stanford, and then her first year was a bit of a flop. And everyone sort of went, what's going on? You win the World Juniors and then you don't qualify for NCAAs, or you don't do what you were expected to do in the NCAAs. And she came out very publicly on social media saying she'd been suffering with massive anxiety and mental health issues. And she put this big post up. And we actually had athletes here in Birmingham that were on their first year of university that read that and went, that's me. That's everything I'm experiencing at the moment, being away from home, still trying to be a high-performing athlete. So her openness at that point was just lovely. And then what does she do? Comes back, wins NCAs in a meeting record. The meeting record has stood for 35 years. It got broken by Michaela Rose in the rounds, but then Roisin Willis breaks it again and wins. And that was just goosebumps for me. And I can't wait. I think she's got a real shot at making the US team for Tokyo. But just delighted with that whole story and the perseverance and the fact that she's managed to get back in the state to put herself on the line and then deliver something so fantastic.
Yeah. I think that's all we've got time for today. Look, we'll be back on Thursday with another big name interview. We're not going to let you know who it is right now, but it helps to build the suspense and the surprise. But every Tuesday we'll be here for these roundups. Go on then. What have you got?
I don't know. I need
You
to
haven't thought
double
one,
check
have
who
you?
it is. No, I don't. Sorry.
So join us on Thursday. If you enjoyed this, please do share, subscribe, follow and review. Join us on Instagram. Podium Athletics Podcast is our handle, or you can email us podiumathleticspodcast@gmail.com. All the links are in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.